Welcome to Disaster Zone, a TV show about emergencies and disasters that can happen at any time. And my guest today is Kurt Bailey. He is the CEO, President and CEO of Bloodworks Northwest. And we'll be talking about our regional blood supply in the middle of a pandemic. Welcome, Kurt.
Thank you, Eric, for having me. It's a pleasure.
We all have blood going through our bodies, and it becomes an important element. But how important is a reliable supply of blood in our regional community for people, in surgery or, emergencies and disasters?
Yeah. Well, a lot of folks don't realize that Western medicine has a dependence on blood transfusion. And blood's used for surgeries of all kinds, certainly surgeries, for example, to repair trauma, but also transplant surgeries, for example. Blood's also used in cancer treatments, which many people don't realize. In fact, almost about a third of all blood that's donated ultimately goes to a cancer patient. Blood's also used for moms, especially postpartum hemorrhage, which has risen substantially for reasons we don't fully understand in the past decade. And a lot of moms now need blood in delivery, some even to survive delivery because the bleeding's so extensive. And then there's all sorts of other things that we don't think of where folks need blood. For example, a fall that results in a brain injury. So blood is essential to being able to care for people, for patients in all types of circumstances. So when the blood supply comes under threat, and that could be from an acute event, a mass shooting, some mass casualty event, an earthquake, or what I call a chronic event, like a pandemic, then the care for those patients is in doubt. So what we endeavor to do is to maintain not just extra blood on the shelf, so to speak, but also to have a system where we can react and we can adapt in the event that there is a disaster and the blood supply is in doubt. Because the last thing any of us need in the midst of a disaster is a blood shortage.
Right. And you mentioned the pandemic. This must have caused you some significant issues in being able to obtain a reliable blood supply and that. So what precautions are you taking now, both for the donor and the staff in drawing blood, and how did that evolve here early in the pandemic? We're now 10 months in, but still it's impacting us.
10 months in the early days, literally, of March 2020, when we came to understand just how contagious was this virus, we stopped all of our mobile blood drives. And for the simple reason that you can't social distance on a blood bus. It's just too cramped. Oftentimes for a mobile drive where we would go to an employer or to a church or to a school, we would be put into cramped quarters and we couldn't social distance there either. And then, of course, there weren't any employees at some of these large employers, and there weren't any students in the schools or members in the churches. And so they were empty and not a particularly good place for us to collect blood anyhow. So we established something called the pop-up. And the pop-up program has been hugely effective. And what we do is we take a venue that has a lot of space and we set up for days or weeks or even months on end to collect blood in that venue. And the very first one was T-Mobile Park with the Mariners. And the Seattle Mariners allowed us to be in that space for 10 weeks. We collect over 3,000 units during that period back in the spring and summer of 2020. And based on that experience, we replicated it. So if you wanted to go donate at a pop-up, Eric, right now, you could go in the next few weeks to the Seattle Aquarium. You could go to Lumen Field where the Seahawks and the Sounders play. You could go back to T-Mobile Park if you wanted to the Mariners. And you could go to the Paramount Theater. And so these are destinations where it's really fun to donate blood in a venue like that. And you get to see that venue in a new way at a time when otherwise, frankly, it would be empty. So the big change was the pop-ups. Second big change was appointment only. So it used to be you could walk in whenever you felt like you wanted to give your donation of blood. Well, we can't do that today because we have to maintain steady flow of people in and out of our locations so we don't get any congestion, because we want to, of course, keep everybody 6 feet or more apart. And with appointments, it allows us to do that. We meter the flow in, meter the flow out of all our donors, and it's very predictable. So those are the two big changes. We did all the cleaning protocols, all the masking, all those other things that are standard now, in addition in those early days of the pandemic in 2020.
Okay, so the people drawing blood, I mean, our medical community is getting vaccinated early. Does that include your staff in that mix of people eligible to get vaccinations early?
It sure does. The CDC put out guidance around what critical healthcare infrastructure was, like what defined that, and they were very clear that the blood collection infrastructure in the United States, which is so critical to all those patients I mentioned earlier, is critical infrastructure. And so all of our employees, just as all other healthcare employees, were put into the early phases of the vaccine distribution program in Washington State and Oregon.
So people should feel safe going and interacting with your staff. And how would you find out where, blood is being drawn at one of these pop-ups in the future? You might be moving locations in the future.
Well, you can go to our website, bloodworksnw.org, and there's always a button there on the page, and it says donate. Click the button, and it'll send you to the donor portal, and you can put your zip code in or your town where you'd like to donate, and it'll give you, in an ever-expanding radius, all the locations in which you could schedule an appointment.
One of the aspects of being in a pandemic and you being in charge of collecting this blood and providing, I know you guys have also been involved in research in that aspect, but how about talk about COVID-19 convalescent plasma? That's actually a treatment to help for people suffering from COVID.
When you're infected with the virus, your body mounts an immune response. In that immune response, antibodies are created, and the antibodies target the virus, and that helps you fight the virus. Well, the thing is, those antibodies stay in your blood plasma after you're fully recovered. They stay for quite some time. And what the research shows, and what past experience with other viruses show, is those antibodies can actually help somebody else if you donate them and then they're transfused into a patient currently fighting COVID-19. And so recovered COVID-19 patients donate their plasma. It's called convalescent plasma. Those antibody-rich plasma units are transfused into patients fighting the virus, and we believe the mortality and the severity of their illness is reduced. This has been a huge national effort, and here in the Pacific Northwest, we have been on the forefront of it. Well over 500,000 units of this convalescent plasma has been transfused nationally, and the Pacific Northwest has certainly played our part in supplying that plasma.
And just one last thing, the geographic size of Bloodworks Northwest, it's not just here in the Puget Sound region, but what is the entire territory you are responsible for?
Well, we're the primary blood collector for the Pacific Northwest. We are the largest, and our operations run from the Canadian border all the way down south of Eugene, Oregon. And so we cover all of Western Washington and a good chunk of Western Oregon. And, that's roughly an area of about 8 million people. So our charge is to make sure there's enough blood for a population of 8 million people every day.
Well, we've been talking to Kurt Bailey, the president and CEO of Bloodworks Northwest. I want to thank you, Kurt, for coming on and the Disaster Zone TV show here and sharing what's being done from a blood perspective to protect people.
It's my pleasure, Eric. Thank you for having me.
And for you at home, you can do other things to protect yourself, starting with social distancing, wearing a mask, get a vaccine when it becomes available for your category or age group. And perhaps you should look at where these pop-up donation sites are, and you can become a donor yourself and contribute to help save people's lives by doing that. Well, thanks for watching, and tune in again soon. Bye-bye.